Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're gearing up for the CPA exam, you already know they absolutely love testing your grasp on profitability and returns. I mean, on the surface, return on investment, return on assets, and return on equity kind of all seem to measure the exact same thing, right? Return. But here's the catch. Confusing exactly who or what is generating that return is absolutely going to cost you points on exam day. So today, we're going to break down these three critical metrics, separate the operating returns from the investor returns, and make sure you know exactly how to apply them when it counts. All right, let's just dive right into our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. Return on investment, 2. Return on assets, 3. Return on equity, 4. We'll run through some ratio mini scenarios, and 5. We'll wrap up with common CPA exam traps. Starting off with Section 1, return on investment, which is really our broad measure of efficiency. Okay, before we get completely lost in the weeds of specific balance sheet items, let's take a step back and look at the picture. ROI is a really broad concept. It basically reflects how efficiently an entity is using its resources to generate a profit. Think of it as the ultimate test of management stewardship. You hand management a bunch of resources, and you want to know how well that they use those resources to produce a return. It's a surprisingly simple relationship, but it is literally the bedrock of all financial statement analysis. And here's what the basic formula looks like. Net income divided by average invested capital. Now, I want you to look really closely at that denominator. Notice the word average. It's not just invested capital. It is average invested capital. We're going to talk a whole lot more about why that specific word is so incredibly crucial later when we get into exam traps, but for now, just burn that word into your memory. Net income over average invested capital. Now, you might be wondering, when is a business activity actually adding real value to a company? The study materials hit on this pretty hard. A firm is only truly adding to shareholder value if its return on investment is higher than its cost of capital. Makes sense, right? If it costs you 5% to borrow money from the bank, and you only generate a 4% return on the project you funded with that cash, you are actually destroying value, even if the project technically shows a profit on paper. Your ROI absolutely must exceed your cost of capital. Moving right along to Section 2, return on assets, or deploying assets for profit. Let's narrow things down a bit and see how this builds into our next metric. ROA describes exactly how well management takes their total assets and turns them into a profit. You can think of this as your overall operating return. ROA doesn't really care whether you funded the company by taking on debt or issuing equity. It just looks at the giant pile of assets the company has and asks, hey, how much profit did this pile generate? By the way, this is also a core foundational piece of the famous DuPont model. And the formula hits the nail right on the head here. Net income divided by average total assets. There is that word average again. Also, keep in mind, we are looking at total assets here. We aren't just talking fixed assets. We aren't just talking working capital. We mean the entire left side of the balance sheet. It's the ultimate measure of pure, unfiltered operational efficiency. Let's flip to Section 3, return on equity, which gives us the investor's perspective. Okay, so now we are shifting over to the right side of the balance sheet. ROE measures the return specifically for the providers of equity capital. And why is this such a key ratio? Well, because the ultimate purpose of a business is to actually provide adequate returns to its investors. A company could have a pretty decent ROA, but if the ROE is terrible, those shareholders are not going to stick around for long. This metric essentially strips away the debt and looks only at what the actual owners are getting back. The math here follows the exact same logical flow, net income divided by average total equity. We're simply taking the bottom line of the income statement and dividing it by the owner's slice of the pie. And, yep, one last reminder, we are still using the average for our denominator here. All right, Section 4, ratio mini scenarios. Time to stress test your understanding. You know the CPA exam isn't just going to hand you a formula and ask you to plug in numbers, right? They want application. So what's really fascinating here is comparing two completely different business models. Imagine a massive grocery chain and a high-end luxury jewelry store. Believe it or not, they might actually have the exact same return on assets, but they get there in totally different ways. The grocery chain, they have razor-thin profit margins, maybe 1 or 2%, but they have massive asset turnover. I mean, they are selling those apples and boxes of cereal incredibly fast. The jewelry store is the exact opposite. It might take them months to sell a single diamond ring, so very low asset turnover, but when they finally do sell it, the profit margin is absolutely huge. The DuPont model teaches us that profit margin multiplied by asset turnover equals ROA. Different paths, exact same destination.
And that brings us to a brilliantly insightful part of the DuPont model, the bridge between ROA and ROE. Think of it like a giant balance scale. You've got resources on one side and your capital structure, so your debt and equity on the other. If a company has just a modest ROA, they can actually still achieve a fantastic ROE for their shareholders by using financial leverage. We call this the equity multiplier. By funding assets with debt instead of equity, you shrink the equity base. So the exact same amount of net income is now being divided among a much smaller pool of equity, which drives the ROE way up. It's a super powerful lever, but as you can probably guess, it definitely comes with risks.
Finally, Section 5, Common CPA Exam Traps, or basically where candidates lose points. All right, real talk for a second. I want to pose this question directly to you. Why do these formulas absolutely demand average balances for assets and equity rather than just pulling that easy year-end number right off the balance sheet? Because if you don't understand the theoretical why behind this, the examiners are going to trick you with the wrong data points for sure. So here is the fundamental logic you've got to remember. Step 1, net income, which is the numerator in all these formulas, comes from the income statement. And the income statement spans an entire accounting period, a whole year of flowing activity. Step 2, total assets or total equity comes from the balance sheet. And the balance sheet is just a snapshot at a single point in time, literally midnight on December 31st. Step 3, you simply cannot mathematically compare a full, flowing year of income to a single frozen snapshot of assets. It doesn't work. So to bridge that gap, we take the beginning balance, add the ending balance, and divide by 2 to get a simple average. That average perfectly approximates the capital level that was maintained throughout the whole year to generate that year-long income.
So with that fundamental logic in your back pocket, let's run through our ultimate success tips and the specific pitfalls you absolutely have to avoid when you sit down on test day. First off, and I know I sound like a broken record here, but the number one trap is using ending balances instead of averages. The exam will almost always give you both. If a question gives you 2 years of balance sheet data, you must calculate the average. Don't fall for it. Second, do not confuse the overall operating return, which is ROA, with a specific investor return, which is ROE. If they ask how well management deployed all resources, that's ROA. Finally, keep an eye out for year-end window dressing. Companies will sometimes delay payments or shift balances around right at year-end just to make their snapshot look a little prettier. This is exactly why analysts rely on averages and honestly, sometimes even monthly averages for highly seasonal businesses just to get the true, unmanipulated picture. I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to test everything we've covered today. Say a company manages to double its return on equity, but its return on assets hasn't changed one bit. What financial risk did management just take on? Well, the answer goes right back to that balance scale we talked about. They didn't magically get better at their operations, they just took on a massive amount of debt to increase their financial leverage. Sure, they boosted the investor's return, but they significantly increased the solvency risk of the entire firm in the process. Keep these relationships straight, always watch out for those average denominators, and you are going to absolutely crush these ratios on exam day. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy studying.